And now, coming to you live from Huntsville Attic Studios, it's Pop Culture Philosophers. And here are your hosts, Rockin, Robbie, Billups, and John Hammertime Holshoe.
Hey everybody, it's the Pop Culture Philosophers, coming to you live from the Huntsville Attic in beautiful Huntsville, Alabama. Excited about today's episode. We're talking about 60s Sci-Fi. Talk about 60s shows, movies, maybe some comic books. I'm John Hammertime Holshoe. I forgot who I was there about 2 seconds into the show. And of course, with me always, our Rockin' Robbie Billups.
Hey John, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. This is a show that we've kicked around the idea.
Yeah.
And it sounds pretty exciting. And as I start looking more into it, not so exciting.
Well, okay, so the origins of this podcast was that somebody wanted to do another Star Trek episode. Yeah. And I was like, well, we've already done one, but let's do 60s science fiction. And I was like, in my head, I was thinking Invaders from Mars, War of the Worlds, Day the Earth Stood Still, and those are all from the 50s. So yeah, this is definitely more difficult as far as the movie list goes, but as far as
TV,
as far as television, as far as like novels, short stories, just comic books and writing and stuff like that.
There's a lot of other sci-fi stuff.
Yes, it's considered the new wave of science fiction. Absolutely. With us tonight, though, that man who did first kind of give us the idea to do this show, Justin Goldsmith.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome back to the show.
We're doing good. How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good. I had an audition yesterday. A callback audition, actually, for a commercial.
Ah, that one you're doing about herpes?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Nah.
What is it actually for? Can you tell us what it's for?
What?
Is it a secret? Can you tell us what it's for?
It's for Cook's Pest Control.
Ah, are you going to play a bug? Are you going to dress you in like a hilarious roach costume?
I'm old enough now where I'm dad.
Oh, my God.
Also with us tonight, we have Mike, the voice Matthews.
Hey, everybody. How you doing? I agree, John. I'm with the Sci-Fi TV. Like, I'd rather do a top 5 of that. I was telling him today at work, like, can we just change this last minute?
There is a lot of great science fiction, 60s television. There's not as many movies, but there's some good movies, and I think we can get it down to a top 5. When I step back and start looking at it, there's a lot more than I realized, but there's also a lot of crap.
There's a lot of off-brand stuff.
Yeah.
Off-brand movies.
Knockoff Star Trek and knockoff, There was a lot of, like, sequels that have a similar title. And like, oh, this must be a sequel to that 50. Oh, no, it's not. It's a knockoff.
Yeah.
War of the Vampires and weirdly weird sci-fi. But they were like vampires from space. There's really weird Well, Gamera came out in the 60s, and obviously that's a knockoff of Godzilla.
Yeah, but just a giant turtle.
Yeah, it's just a giant turtle.
It's way cooler, though, man.
I love Gamera.
But it definitely gives us some of the most classic science fiction characters.
Oh, that's true. There's some great characters from the 60s science fiction films, and some great actors, some great roles, some iconic roles, some that get quoted today, and I'm sure those quotes will come up. So I was going to ask you guys, I'll start with Goldsmith. He himself is an actor. Are there some actors from 60s science fiction films that stand out in your mind, some great actors, some great roles that stand out?
As far as films go, the first thing that comes to my mind is Vincent Price in Last Man on Earth.
Oh, okay.
He's one of my favorite.
Vincent Price in anything.
Yeah, and that movie is almost exclusively Vincent Price, so it's fantastic.
I seriously think he's one of the greatest actors of all time, and he's in so many iconic, like, science fiction and horror movies. He's just great.
Well, I thought that was Will Smith in that movie.
The remake, I Am Legend.
Or was it Charlton Heston?
Was
the Omega Man
too?
The Omega Man. Yeah, another I Am Legend adaptation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good pick, though. I mean, Vincent Price, you can't beat that, man.
Right. So
that's the answer to
guys.
everything. Just use that as the default answer to something, Vincent Price. What about?
Yeah.
I'm going to start with Robbie.
Yeah.
Start with Robbie. I guess I didn't start.
I'm going to go with Vincent Price from Star Trek.
Oh, wow.
No, I mean, Leonard Nimoy as Spock. That's one of the best characters.
Wait, was Vincent Price on Star Trek? He might have been.
I don't know. He was on Batman. He was Egghead.
Yes, he was.
No, but Leonard Nimoy Spock, that's absolutely one of the best science fiction characters I think ever created. I'm surprised that you didn't say...
Well, he said movies, I would have said that.
Did you say movies?
I said movies, but let's talk shows, too, because there's a bunch of
60s
great...
Sci-Fi.
Yeah, there's a bunch of great actors.
Well, I got one from a movie as well, and the one from a movie was played by Douglas Rain, and that's HAL 9000.
Yeah.
Like, I love that character. It's so creepy. But it's such a journey. of the character. You get what I'm saying?
What are you doing, Dave?
Yeah, like and the end when he's like Daisy, Daisy, right? Like spoilers, Mike, but like I love it. Like it's so amazing, and it's just a great character. And then Douglas Rain, the way that he performed that, perfection.
It's a great character, and it's a character that has been it's influenced a lot of other science fiction.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
What about you, Mike? Any characters or actors that stand out, roles, performances in movies and shows? We'll do shows as well because there's a lot of great science fiction shows out there, and there's some standout performances, and some great actors actually had migrated from the small screen to the silver screen because of their performances.
I was just going to say Adam West.
Oh, the great Adam West.
Yes, Adam West.
Nice.
Adam West. Whose last name he changed because, well, first off,
Adam
Batman
West from what?
Is Adam West technically?
No, but from what?
Well, he was in Batman, but is that sci-fi?
I don't think. What are you talking about, Mike?
I really liked Adam West's performance in Robinson Crusoe in Space.
Oh, Robinson Crusoe in Space. Adam West is in that?
Yeah.
I did not
Him and the
realize
monkey.
that. I did not realize. I've never actually seen that film. I'm familiar with it, but I never saw it. I didn't realize he was in that.
Dude, he's in it for like 2 minutes.
In what?
I was going to take Leonard Nimoy, but you took it from me.
Did you only watch the first 2 minutes of that film?
I watched that first 5-minute clip off of YouTube.
I like Adam West. I love Adam West though.
Adam West is in Robinson Crusoe and Mars, but he's like the very beginning, and then one actually very creepy part towards the middle of the film as well.
Oh, I mean that's one of those probably 60 films I haven't seen. Although I'm familiar with it.
Can I say Peter Sellers?
You can say whatever you want.
Okay.
Hey, since I didn't get a TV guy,
Slim
I'm going to
Pickens.
say Jonathan Harris, the guy that played Dr. Smith in Lost in
Oh,
Space.
Yeah.
I always loved that character when I was a kid.
I couldn't remember his name.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, this is all about all of science fiction in the 60s. Now, of course, our top 5 coming up is going to be all about the movies, but there's so much science fiction. I think the 60s, we did start off the show, John, talking about how the 60s maybe didn't have the best sci-fi movies, but it's definitely across the board a very revolutionary time for science fiction.
Oh yeah, especially TV. I think by then too. Towards the end of the 50s, everybody's got a television. In the 60s, then everybody really does have a television. So television had took off. It was a big boom.
Yes.
And science fiction played a big role in that. And there's some fantastic stuff. We'll get to that in a second, but there's some fantastic stuff.
What are your favorite characters?
I would say, well, Douglas Rain, you already brought up from Hell 9000. I like Charlton Heston's character in Planet of the Apes. And just, it's so quotable, Get your damn... I can't remember the quote.
It's so quotable. What's the character's name? Do you remember?
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
I don't either. Anybody remember that? Justin's the guy who's supposed to figure that out.
You blow it up.
It's probably like a colonel or something, right? Wasn't he like an astronaut? Something like that?
Yeah, I think the backstory is he was in the military and he was now an astronaut, and then he landed. He thinks he landed on a foreign planet, and of course he's
he's not.
Spoilers. It's not.
He goes through some kind of time travel, are they using like special relativity in that, or does he go through like a wormhole or something like that?
George Taylor.
I don't remember.
George Taylor, of course.
Yeah, because
I don't remember the explanation. I just remember that he was actually back on Earth. So I don't know if he was stuck and suspended in time or something like that. But yeah, I think it's "Get your damn hands off me, you damn dirty ape." I think is the exact quote.
I think is it "Get your damn hands off me, you dirty ape"?
I think it's just "Get your damn hands off me, you dirty ape."
I thought it was "You damn dirty, you damn dirty apes."
It's something over the top like that.
And there's a bunch of he's got a bunch of over the top. He overacts. I don't know if you noticed that.
Does he?
But that's his greatest film.
As
I said, I knew you could argue with me.
I wouldn't say that.
I knew if anybody was going to argue with me, it'd be you.
I wouldn't say that.
He might have had some other roles that he might be more famous for than Planet of the Apes.
One of the best things about the science fiction of the 60s are those themes that are brought up. And I'm not just talking about the Star Trek theme, and all that stuff. That didn't sound like the Star Trek theme at all. Anyway, No, the ideas behind these stories. So, of course, science fiction had a big golden age back in the 40s and the 50s. There was like tons of stuff. You had Philip K. Dick and Isaac Asimov coming up and like doing really groundbreaking work, right? Like with their short stories, with their novels, and even the movies of the time and stuff like that. Of course, not television so much, right? But the 60s kind of brought in that new wave, right? And it was this new idea, a little bit more of a cynical nature towards the science fiction. So let's discuss some of the themes, right? And to bring it up, first of all, I think that what they call the golden age of science fiction is the 40s and the 50s, right? And you have this idea that science is like the universal problem solver. Like science is going to solve everything for us. Like we can fix everything with science. We can explain all the mysteries of the universe with science. Everybody was very hopeful and optimistic about the power of science. But then in the 60s, you start leaning into like things like the Cold War, because like, and during the war, like World War II, the idea that science and industry and like that's what we use to make the world better, right? But now because of the Cold War, because of the spy nature of things, people are like started becoming more obsessed with apocalyptic fiction. They started becoming more obsessed with the idea of fear of advancement and a distrust of man and of government and of society. The fact that maybe society isn't going to be able to fix it, even with these amazing technological advances. And we are literally on our way to the moon at this time, in America, right? And there's all this hope for it, but there's all this distrust about what's actually going on. You got the Civil Rights Movement, you got the Vietnam War, you got a lot of unrest going on. And all this, I think, really kind of found its way into science fiction of the time, and of course the futurism aspect of what's projecting out what's going to come forward, the advent of computers and that kind of technology, right? And so you have a fear of that, you have that distrust of machine, you have this whole idea of man versus machine, and actually what's the difference? What are some of the themes that you think are the most prevalent, and why, and how do they relate to popular culture and society at the time, Justin?
That's a very expansive question you just asked.
Yeah, correct. This is an expansive podcast.
Yeah. Well, the prepared response I had for this was completely different from that. But like, what you say one of the things that you just said again. I was kind of zoned
How about
out.
how the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis and things like that, and people thought that at any moment destruction and the apocalypse would come. And that started like, instead of these things about us going out and like conquering like civilization out into space or whatever, we're now in fear of like aliens destroying us or us destroying us.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of us versus them stuff, and then you also had other stuff that, like, it was either that or a golden image of the future, like Star Trek, like idealism. There was a really, really wide spectrum of stuff that was going on back then. But
even in Star Trek, one of the prevalent themes is the idea of the way they talk about the human history, the way they talk about Earth in the 20th century. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And how
they do.
Star Trek is a response to what was going on in American society.
Yeah,
at the time.
exactly.
Civil Rights Movement, Vietnam War, stuff like that.
And they even talk about like how in the late 20th century, like it was supposedly in the 90s, we were supposed to have the eugenics war.
Yeah, that's where Khan comes from.
Yeah. So even, there was some things are going to get bad before they are going to get worse before they get better in Star Trek, too.
Yeah, speaking of getting worse before they get better, John, what do you think? I pulled a John with the segue there. You like
that? Yeah, all that stuff. All of that stuff. No, I think realistically, the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cold War, that whole thing, I think really brought a fear of, it changed that whole science perception of, yes, in the future we're going to have flying cars and we're going to have robot friends, and to more like we're going to be our own self-destruction. Like we're going to be our own demise. We're going to build missiles and nuclear devices and blow ourselves up, or get in a fight over land or something, blow ourselves up, which has not happened. Just at a smaller scale. So I think you see that more in films and book. And then when was Fahrenheit 451 written? I know in the 60s they made a movie based on it. When did the actual book come out? Because they did the movie, and so that too, like that kind of whole concept of this
53.
Okay.
1953.
So the book wasn't in the 60s, but
but there's a reason why they made that movie in the 60s.
Yeah.
and definitely that was on the mind of the creators of that film. What's really cool, though, is to juxtapose that, to put the flip side of that. Like, we are on our way to the moon, and there is a little bit of an optimism. Even a movie like 2001. So, like, for instance, the political satire that Kubrick did, Dr. Strangelove, that some people could argue is a science fiction film, deals with a lot of this, like, this fear of, like, nuclear holocaust and stuff like that, and how much the powers that be, they're just pie fighting, basically, when stakes are that high.
But that whole going to the moon thing, was that a optimism thing? Or was that where we were like, oh shit, we got to beat the Russians?
That was part of that, wasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it was we have to beat the Russians.
But there's also an inspiration there. And so if you look at the difference between a film like Dr. Strangelove into 2001 and how hopeful 2001 kind of feels, even though it does have its eerie qualities, it's a very, like, optimistic film about the future of mankind, which is way different than something like Dr. Strangelove. Mike, what do you think about some of these themes, and which ones kind of are more prevalent to you, or what do you want to speak on?
Everything that you're saying so far: Cold War, nuclear war, hopefulness, dread, apocalyptic fiction. What is apocalyptic? Is apocalyptic fiction sci-fi?
Apocalyptic, like science fiction films can result into an apocalyptic future,
like a nuclear bomb going off.
In the original Lost in Space, did they have to abandon Earth because Earth was
things like that?
Or something? And sir, I can't remember the.
I think they
purpose
went
of
into it in the original series.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was how the started, because that's a dark way to look at the show.
Like, movies like in The Time Machine, for instance, one of the big themes of that film, a little bit in the book, but really prevalent in the film, is that as he's going forward through time, he sees that humanity does not get their shit together. There's still wars. And even when they have this amazing technology and basically no need or want for anything, they're still warring, they're still enslaving people and stuff like that, right? So, like, the idea that science fiction writers, instead of just this enormous sense of wonder, they start throwing out the dangers of the future of mankind. And futurism is a big part of it. I definitely think projecting things into the future. And that's why something like Dr. Strangelove does kind of border there just a little bit.
Yeah, because everything that you're saying, it's Dr. Strangelove. So that's why I feel that it's more of it's got the sci-fi elements, and that's why.
Yeah, I got you.
I thought Dr. Strangelove was a Van Halen song.
No.
I thought it was a Cypress Hill song.
I was going to say something about I think we talked about it during the 80s horror podcast, where, like, up until the late 80s or so, the horror movies were kind of not cookie cutter or whatever, but they're all kind of generally. We talked about on the 80s horror podcast, like in the 80s, they started just throwing ideas out and just doing weird shit.
Yeah.
And in 60s sci-fi, it seems like that's what they've been doing. So they've had like these 20 years of really cool sci-fi stuff, and then there's all kinds of weird shit in the 60s.
Yeah, it's because especially
drugs.
With the writers of the with the writers of the new wave, they were really kind of thinking that we've had 20 years of the same sci-fi stories. Yeah. It's getting tired. It's getting boring. It's getting cliched.
Space vampires.
So, space vampires. And I'll be honest with you, that Space Vampires movie is on my top 5. But actually, so one of the other things that we haven't quite touched on too much was the whole idea about man versus machine, the fear of the computer, the fear of the artificial intelligence. That really kind of starts there. And in films like 2001, which is basically a film about human evolution, right? So it starts off with the apes, Mike. You remember that part, right?
Yeah.
It starts off there. It goes up into, like, the moment where we're able to start traveling through space, and then it goes into artificial intelligence, and then it goes into, of course, the higher purpose of humanity, which is to become these celestial star children. That's basically the ending of that movie, right?
Yeah, it's I wonder what drugs Stanley Kubrick was doing.
But what is the answer? What's the difference? Because that's something that I think is really prevalent in some of these films. One of my favorite science fiction writers is Philip K. Dick. And we've talked about him on the science fiction podcast way back in the day. He's got a very prevalent theme that he likes to use, which is man versus machine. But more importantly, what is the difference? It's something that the Matrix films, I think, bring into the idea again, is what's the difference between a man and a machine? Now, in the book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which was written in the 60s, which became Blade Runner, the idea that Philip K. Dick is bringing across is empathy. Empathy is the difference. A machine can't feel for another machine, right? And if you look at 2001, Hal never feels for other people. He feels for himself. He fears for himself, but he doesn't do other people. What do you think, the man versus machine, what do you think about that stuff, John?
I think it's a great concept, and you're right, it really kicks off in the 60s. And Space Odyssey obviously being the big one. I think it's a great concept because it continues, obviously, the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, this concept of, well, there's a lot of, there's some just general fear. There's like evil robots and stuff like that. And some of even the shows and movies with the aliens are just like straight up robots.
Yeah.
But like the Borg, I mean, that comes later in Star Trek, but they're machines, right? I mean, they're not.
Yeah.
They're not,
Well, yeah.
they're not,
And it's a collective consciousness.
Yeah, they're not
have.
biological in theory.
No,
So
they are biological, but it is a machine intelligence,
okay.
right? Yeah.
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 Okay, kind of sidetracked.
I mean, there were people
The
at
Borg
one
wasn't
point,
in the
I
60s.
guess.
It all comes from V'ger. We know that.
So
We know
but then this whole idea of, I think Phil K. Dick was the first to really talk about that whole differentiate between a man versus machine and having feelings and having a soul, and he wasn't just saying, oh, there's evil robots or there can be evil robots. He gave us kind of this idea of them evolving and differentiating between them. Blade Runner does. I mean, I know it's not from the 60s, but Blade Runner does.
Well, but the book is written.
Yeah,
in
based
the
on
60s.
based on that book, which what you said it's
Do androids dream of electric sheep?
Yeah.
And yet he does answer the question, I think, with empathy, but in the book and especially even in the movie, like the androids, the replicants show empathy as well.
Yeah.
And in the movie, if you think that Deckard is a replicant, he shows empathy. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Like, not only are how are they different, but are we the same? The human body is just another machine, is it not?
Yeah.
Human society is just another machine. And so the correlation between the fear of this unknown and how this unknown thing, like whether it's computers, machine, artificial intelligence, it is us and it's fear of us, and it ultimately leads to fear of God or something. But that's way deep, right?
Well, I was going to add one quick thing too. Like in Blade Runner 2049, it's the robots that have feeling and empathy, and the humans are very robotic.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, like, because in the book, "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" the humans have to like use this machine that's like an empathy machine, and they touch it, and like the book is way different than the movie, but there's some similar stuff in there, especially in theme. But they have to, like, humans have to go to this machine, and it's kind of like a virtual reality thing, and they go in there, and there's this like messiah type figure in their culture, and they take on his role, and they're walking up a hill while people are throwing rocks at them, and it helps them feel empathy with something else. And so, yeah, that, like, humanity is leading itself into a machine-like state, and machines are becoming more like humans, and that's so scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not for a spoiler, but it was kind of interesting when you said the humans are a machine, and the fact that did y'all see Chernobyl?
Just the first episode.
It's not really a spoiler, but it's a really important scene. But the guy pretty much goes, "We're going to have to use human robots because the robots aren't working." And everybody was just like, "What?" And then you figured it out, and you're just like, "Oh shit, it's deep."
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to take a quick break, but that reminds me we should check out a band from Huntsville called the Wolves of Chernobyl. Pretty awesome band.
Great band.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're talking about science fiction television on Pop Culture Philosophers. Hey everybody, welcome back to Pop Culture Philosophers, talking about 60s sci-fi. We're actually talking about right now 60s sci-fi television, because we talked earlier about some of the movies and the themes, but really 60s television was dominated with science fiction. Just look up 60s television in general, and there's way more science fiction shows. There's Star Trek, there's Lost in Space, there's Outer Limits and Doctor Who. The Twilight Zone started in the 50s but continued well into the 60s. The Jetsons, a damn cartoon about space and flying cards and a robot, was she a butler? No, like a nanny. What is she?
Did you say
Housekeeper?
flying cards?
Cars. Flying cars. They had those spaceship car things. And
The Jetsons was great.
The Jetsons was phenomenal, but I really feel like the Jetsons misled us, because it's if you're listening just this year, who knows? Maybe you'll listen to next year. We still don't have flying cars, man.
Did they ever give a year?
Yeah, is there
when
a
that
time? Is there a year for the Jetsons? I got to wonder that, John.
There's a lot of stuff that I watch, sci-fi shows and movies, where like this is the future, and there's like flying cars and shit. 1999. I'm like, wait a minute,
yeah, Blade Runner.
you guys overshot.
2019.
Yeah, you overshot that just a bit. 60s sci-fi. So there's some phenomenal 60s sci-fi shows.
Just for reference, the Jetsons was produced by Hanna-Barbera in 1962 and was set in 2062.
Oh, okay. So we got
We
a little
still
bit
got
of
a
time to
chance.
get
Time
there.
to get those tall houses.
Yeah, I still don't have a robot housekeeper. That's what I want more than the flying car.
Well, we got robot vacuums, so we're almost
Yeah.
there.
We're almost there.
Almost
You just got to put people-shaped
Yeah.
things on top of them.
Just put a wig on it. Just put a wig on it.
Just be like, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jetson.
Oh,
I actually would start with Goldsmith because I think one of the reasons we did this is Goldsmith is a known is it a Trekkie? Lover of Star Trek. I think everybody I know, I don't know anybody that dislikes Star Trek. There's certain levels
Drew
of
hates it.
Yeah,
how
Dashing
much.
Drew hates it.
Okay, well, okay, so there's one.
I think it's just out of spite for me,
I think
though.
there's just
Probably.
people like it to a certain. They either think it's just okay or they love it. You know what I'm saying? There's nobody I know that just sit and watch. Even the original series, I love TNG too, but the original series is phenomenal, and it's actually pretty damn innovative for its time.
Yeah.
Speak to that a little bit, Goldsmith. You're a big Star Trek guy. Who's your favorite character on Star Trek, the original show? If you had to pick one, and I'm putting you on the spot,
I mean, damn.
dude. As much
Kirk,
as
I guess.
people talk
I
shit
mean,
about
real.
him now, like, oh, he overacts, whatever. I'm watching the original show, and man, was he good looking.
It's yeah.
Man, he was a good looking guy.
And it's fun to watch. Like he's
man.
fun to watch him do those scenes as
And
Captain Kirk.
people talk about the overacting, but I think he does a great job. Like, I think the whole cast is great. There's some really creative stories. I'm surprised some of the stuff where they just kind of venture off. They do some crazy. I mean, really, there's some far out, wild, varied stories.
Yeah.
In that short run that the show had, the show was phenomenal.
And I wanted to bring up, although I love the character Montgomery Scott, to quote Craig Ferguson in one of his stand-up specials, James Doohan's Scottish accent that he used for Scotty sounds like a Pakistani man having a stroke.
Who played him in the new show? Was it in the new film? I mean,
Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg.
it was Simon Pegg. What role did Butcher play? He's on it, right?
Oh, Carl Urban was.
Yeah,
He was Bones.
He was
yeah.
Bones. Okay, thank you. Is he also Scottish? Where's
McCoy.
Who?
McCoy? Is he the actual actor that plays him? Is he Australian?
Who are you?
DeForest Kelly?
No, I've jumped ship. I've jumped ship completely to Butcher. What's his origin?
Carl Urban's
Carl Urban.
Australian.
He's Australian. Okay, I
Right.
don't know.
What does that have to do with 60s science
Oh
fiction?
no, I kind of sidetracked. We're talking about actors for. Anyway, let's go back to Star Trek.
He's from New Zealand. Carl Urban is from New
Oh,
Zealand,
he's from
not
New Zealand, yeah.
Australian.
He's
Totally
Aussie.
different.
That's
Totally
why I
different.
had a question
Very
mark above
similar.
my head.
Anyway,
He's from the Shire.
oh,
God, I've been coughing for a week. What about Star Trek? What do you need to know?
so is that your favorite 60s sci-fi show?
I mean, yeah.
That's the reason we're
although
doing the show.
I
today.
started watching Star Trek when I was kindergarten, maybe. But before that, like one of the first shows I ever remember watching was Lost in Space. Because one of our family friends bought.
Was Lost in Space. It's terrible.
It was horrible. He gave me a big, huge tub full of like you remember the Columbia House VHS order
VHS,
service?
yeah. There's like 2 episodes per VHS or something. Yeah.
And he had like the whole series almost on VHS.
It takes up an
on
entire
those.
wall in the living room.
Yeah, and have you got that too?
No.
I do. I've
the
got
VHS?
I've still got the tubs at my house.
No, I have it on Blu-ray, homie.
It just takes up a slot on the shelf.
That's a great show. Both Lost in Space and Star Trek. But Lost in Space is
And Lost in Space was
Right.
before. It came out in like 63,
65, 60 or something like that. Maybe it
was-
ended in 65 or something.
it
Yeah.
definitely feels very 50s. I don't know. It feels Star Trek in comparison. Star Trek seems
'Cause-
much more advanced.
Yeah.
I think that's just, you think that because it's in color.
Well, they remastered.
could
They're
be
not
it.
always on a ship.
The last season or two of Lost in Space was in color. I'm pretty sure when it first aired.
Yeah, but I never saw those episodes.
Well, also the dynamic of the people in the show. It's like the idyllic American 1950s family and a robot and a creepy old dude.
Yeah.
So
Swiss
that's-
Family Robinson.
Yeah.
Space
And that's
family
probably why
robots.
it feels 50s to you. It's because of that aspect of it.
True that.
Yeah.
What about you, Mikey? 60s sci-fi show. What stands out? What's your favorite?
Twilight Zone all the way.
Oh, started in the 50s, but it went well into
It started like 59.
59
Okay.
is when it started.
Yeah.
Yeah, it started in 59.
I believe early 50s. 59, I believe. And then Outer Limits, of course.
59's got the original intro, which I like a lot better than the door and the clock and the eye and the window shattering. Like that's the one that everybody knows. But
Yeah.
growing on me, the original intro is pretty cool. So the whole thing it's well written. People that like when oh crap, I can't remember the actor's name. It's the guy that played Roscoe Pico Train in Dukes of Hazzard.
Oh, yeah.
He was in a bunch of them. Kurt was in a bunch of them. Slim Pickens.
Mergis
Meredith?
Meredith? Yeah.
Burgess Meredith.
Mergis Meredith. What?
I said yeah, too. I'm like,
like,
the penguin. The fucking penguin.
But all these actors that we ended up watching in other shows and
Yeah.
in movies later
Yeah.
on, early on in our life.
They've got a great cast.
they've got
Holy
the-
shit.
they-
And
their
what
start in
was
it.
the announcer's name?
Rod
It's Rod Serling.
Sterling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a great name.
And he's a great writer, too. He wrote a lot of them, too.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he's famous. Yeah. He's
And you were talking about Outer Limits. Like, me had Harlan Ellison wrote some of those. Like, there's the one of the man with the glass hand or whatever from Outer Limits. An amazing episode, man. Those are great. I love that. The Anthology. You don't get that anymore.
I miss like that. They did do Amazing Stories by Spielberg.
Yeah, but it
in,
didn't
like,
last
the 80s.
long.
It didn't last long.
And for the horror genre, they did Masters of Horror and Fear Itself, but it didn't last long.
Well, you
Like,
got,
nobody's down for the Anthology anymore.
Tales from the Crypt are
There's,
short-lived.
Black Mirror?
American Horror Story and Black Mirror. Those
Black Mirror.
Those have been
Black
pretty
Also,
good for anthologies.
have you guys ever heard of a YouTube channel called Rocket Jump?
No.
They're a studio in L.A., but they did a series on Hulu that was a season called Dimension 404, and it's kind of like Twilight Zone but goofier, or Black Mirror, whichever one you want to.
Well, they never hit that level of something like Game of Thrones or The Office or anything like that. Like, it just seems like back then, like, it seems like whether it was short story anthologies, magazines, comic books, television shows, like, people loved anthologies, it seems, you know.
Well,
but
there were like 6 channels back then too. And Twilight
well,
Zone
yeah,
was
they
one
were
of the 8
just
shows.
stuck with whatever. But
It's true.
It's
That's
genius though
smart.
too, because
Yeah.
like you didn't have to be like, you know, today, like you can't just jump into Stranger Things
Right.
in season 3,
Yeah.
you know, but you could watch any episode of Twilight Zone and
Yeah.
it would work, you know.
Yeah, I think Black Mirror is really right. Black Mirror is the only thing
Black
that's
is
really
really
done that in the last
With success.
couple years. That's
People
been
try.
successful.
Well, I mean, it
That's an
was
anthology.
on BBC and then it got canceled. And
Netflix picked it up.
picked it
Thank
up.
And they
God,
also got
because-
the new Twilight Zone with Jordan
Oh, yeah.
Peele. Have you watched any of that?
It's okay.
No,
It's not,
no, I haven't actually.
I watched a couple of episodes and it's okay, but I'd rather watch the original.
I'm waiting till Picard till I re-access my
Oh, my
CBS
God.
All Access.
It's gonna more Star Trek.
I was gonna say if you don't have cable TV and you just got the air channels, one of the cool things is that Lost in Space comes on like Friday nights. At like 10
MeTV
o'clock.
or whatever?
MeTV,
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's really. It's just. I found myself watching like oh, I gotta watch the new.
I love me
episode.
some MeTV.
And that first episode of Twilight Zone, by the way, the new one is available on YouTube.
Yeah.
CBS put it up
So
there,
Kumail
just
Nanjiani's in
sort
that
of
one.
to get people hooked on CBS All Access. Robbie,
Star Trek, amazing. You know, you were talking about William Shatner as Kirk, and I already mentioned Leonard Nimoy as Spock. And I just recently rewatched the Galileo 5 episode. You remember that one? It's the one where they take the Galileo shuttlecraft and they crash on that planet,
Yeah.
and Kirk's got an ambassador up there, and he's like, "We got to go deliver these medical supplies. We don't have time to look for your people." And like the shuttlecraft crew, they don't trust Spock. You know.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that episode. I think it's so
Yeah.
good. So that one, Sitting on the Edge of Forever, I think is probably my favorite piece of 60s sci-fi on television.
Good pick.
Is that episode. I really, really like that. And Twilight Zone. And the 2 episodes that really stick out to me are Eye of the Beholder, obviously. Very famous one. But my favorite episode of Twilight Zone ever is 5 Characters in Search of an Exit. Do you guys remember that one? It's about like a clown and a ballerina and a soldier and a bagpipe player. Like 5 people. They're in this room, right? And they can't find the exit. And they're just freaking out. And they all start like blaming each other and all this kind of stuff. And it turns out, spoilers, that they're all just toys in like a waste basket. like in reality, right? I don't know, but something in the way that it's a soldier, it's a ballerina, it's a clown, it's a bagpipe player, like the way that they kind of took over these archetypes, I really like it. But yeah, Twilight Zone and Star Trek, and we were talking about like anthology shows, it's always case of the week shows kind of get on that. And like Star Trek in its way is almost like an anthology show. Obviously it's the same crew, the same characters, but it's a completely different episode every time. And I don't think it holds up as much as some of the later series like TNG or DS9 for sure. Even Voyager, at times, early Voyager, never Enterprise. But,
have you finished it? Have you ever watched the whole? Never mind.
No,
Let's
of course
not go
not.
off on this.
But Star Trek, Twilight Zone. What about you, John?
I was gonna say, yeah, I think we discussed it. I love Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, of course, Star Trek, The Jetsons.
What about Space Ghost?
Space Ghost.
Space Ghost.
I like Space Ghost, but I think more of
Space
Space Ghost is an interviewer.
Oh, yeah, that's
Later
Ghost.
on.
Another one of my favorite 60s sci-fi shows is The Adventures of Aquaman. That's a good one.
When was the
A
Fantastic
little bit
Four?
more fantasy.
When's the Fantastic Four cartoon? Was that
The first one was in the 60s. Yeah,
Was it
now
in
that
the
you think of it,
60s?
the late 60s. Yeah, you're right.
68, 69, somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
you're right. I got to put that one on there too. And what about Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea? I used to watch reruns of that all the time. I think on Sci-Fi Channel or something. You remember that one?
I don't. There was a animated
Like 67,
Fantastic
60.
Voyage cartoon.
There was.
That didn't live up to the movie. That was one of the earlier, like, hey, this movie was popular. What about Johnny Quest? Was that in the 60s?
Yes,
Yes.
it
Yeah.
was.
That was short. For it being as popular as it is and famous as it is, I didn't realize how short-lived the show was.
Syndication.
Did it get popular later on? Yeah, like, right?
I don't know. Yeah.
All these cartoons, I think very few people that remember fondly some of these early cartoons from the 60s, 70s, 80s even, for us, 90s sometimes. I think sometimes we didn't actually watch them on their original airing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was like, oh, no, I grew up watching Super Friends. No, that stuff is in the 70s, homie.
Well, there was some stuff from the...
There was.
the,
Galactic Guardians,
the new
I remember
Friends
that
or
one.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But,
one-
but there's so many stuff I watched in reruns. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I learned and absorbed and I thought was new. When if you're 3 years old or 5 years old, it's new to you.
Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah.
So
You didn't see it.
what were your favorites? Twilight Zone?
I'd say Twilight Zone,
Outer
Star
Limits?
Trek, Outer Limits. I love the Jetsons. I think the Jetsons actually is one of those cartoons. A lot of those cartoons I liked as a kid, I go back and watch, and that means all 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, 90s. Jetsons actually holds up. It's hilarious. The writing is great. The animation holds up. Of course, it's Hanna-Barbera. I think Hanna-Barbera is the greatest animation company of all time as far as television. I just think they had they had it, man. They had everything, and they had a great writing crew. The art style was great. Dude, the Jetsons.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things I was going to add was about the Twilight Zone is that we got the first zombie, like modern day zombie, like before. The episode's called.
Wait a minute, George A. Romero didn't invent the zombie.
No, it's an episode called Pigeons from Hell, and there used to be voodoo zombies where possession and taking over, but now it turns into zombies rising from the dead, like they're coming out of the grave, and that came from the Twilight Zone.
The problem with rewatching the show, The Twilight Zone, is there are some episodes I'm like, this is amazing, and then there'll be an episode like, the fuck is this? You know what I'm saying? They took some risk. It doesn't always pay off.
That's what I was
There's
saying
some
earlier.
great
In the
ones.
60s, they just started throwing random shit out there.
Yeah, they did.
The creepy ones are always the best ones.
One of the best things about shows like The Outer Limits or the Twilight Zone or even Star Trek at times, we were talking about City on the Edge of Forever. That's written by Harlan Ellison. Some of the best sci-fi writers did some of their best work in the 60s. Of course, you got people like Philip K. Dick, Isaac Asimov, Harlan Ellison, Ray Bradbury, just tons of people. What's the dude's name that did Dune? Frank
Herbert.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
really big deals. What are some of your favorite written bits? Like, not television, not movies, but we're talking about the printed page, whether it's comic books, whether it's short stories, whether it's novels, whether it's novellas, whatever it is. Mike, what are some of your favorites from the 60s?
I was going to say Philip K. Dick and Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay. Any particular works?
I don't know. I just have the Philip K. Dick short stories, volume 1 and 2. So it's kind of like it's everything that's in there.
I gotcha.
So I mean, his whole body of work, it was always interesting to see. And then you read about him, and then like, oh wow, like he was going through this, like the drugs and the freak out or whatever he had, and you can see that in his writing of where he got that from, and it's interesting to.
Yeah.
So you love collected dicks, is what you're telling me.
Well, we are a group of collected dicks, so yeah, I do.
Speaking of, Justin, what about you?
You're an actor.
Aside from the Philip K. Dick stories that I've read for other podcasts, because I don't read a lot, especially old stuff, but
It's obvious
I have.
that you don't read a lot.
I have read part of, and I'm very much aware of, in Isaac Asimov's magazine, there was a novella called Enemy Mine, and they made a movie about it in '85.
Yeah.
And it's basically what it's almost it's what that episode of the Darmok and Jalad episode of TNG was based off of, almost.
Okay.
Like two enemy combatants basically are trying to survive on a planet together.
Learning how to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. I like that.
I really like that story.
I like that. What about you, John?
I would say Ray Bradbury. No. I'm familiar with some great writers. I've read some great books. Not as much anymore. It seems like I've never finished a book. I'll get excited about something. But what I think I do love, I love me some X-Men. And that was the 60s.
Yes,
and that's
it was.
sci-fi. And the Fantastic Four. I don't know if you noticed. they were introduced in the 60s.
I didn't even
I'm
think
not a
of
big
that.
Fantastic Four fan. I do like the Fantastic Four. Galactus is awesome. Freaking Doctor Doom is one of the most badass villains, period, bar none, in any comics.
You are correct, sir.
So I do like Fantastic Four, but X-Men, man, as far as like 60s, any as far as word on the print page in the 60s,
Yeah.
the X-Men's my fucking bread and butter.
And Jack and Stan in the 60s, there was no Wolverine, there was no Storm, there's no Nightcrawler, there wasn't any of that crazy Onslaught, Apocalypse, none of that. But dude, just the original 5 X-Men, Xavier, Magneto, the Brotherhood of Mutants, the Blob, all that stuff, it works so well. The Juggernaut, like, it's powerful, it's dynamic. And some of my favorite written science fiction in the 60s is comic books. Fantastic Four is probably my absolute single favorite representation of science fiction in the 1960s.
61, right? Is that when Fantastic
It started
Four
in 61, yeah. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love it. Anybody who knows me or knows this show or this channel, they just,
it's
what I mean.
sci-fi. I mean, it's not the traditional superhero thing. It's a science fiction.
And it's science fiction, and it's all about adventure. It's all about exploration. It's all about creating new ideas at all times. It's one of the most imaginative comic books of all time, is that Jack Kirby Stan Lee run of Fantastic Four. It lasts like 103 issues. Amazing stuff. Comic book-wise, also Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. Spider-Man in the 60s is amazing. The Ditko stuff with Lee, Ramita coming in. Fantastic stuff. Power, responsibility. Great stuff. I loved it, man. Mike, real quick, comic books. You're like a comic book guy. What's some of your favorite comic books of the 60s? Sci-fi.
Strange Adventures,
Yeah.
stuff like that. I know it's more horror based, but I was always a big fan of Tales from the Crypt. Huge X-Men fan, but I mean, y'all have already spoke about a lot about that. And then
Heck yeah.
Fantastic Four is great, but it's like My Greatest Adventure, stuff like that. The obscure,
Like more like the DC cool anthology, like Adam Strange.
Yeah.
And then like 6 other sci-fi adventures and stuff like that. Yeah.
the space cab.
To round out what the rest of mine, my favorite novel might be Man in the High Castle. It's an alternate history. I don't know if it's really quite a sci-fi thing, but Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is totally sci-fi. I love that. I love Arthur C. Clarke's novel, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think that's great. There's an Isaac Asimov short story called Machine That Won the War. I absolutely adore it. It's about this machine. These 3 dudes are celebrating the idea that they just defeated this race of aliens or something, if I remember correctly, and it's with this computer. But then they all each admit that they falsified information put into the computer or received from the computer, so it actually wasn't about the machine. And I just read that one really
Okay,
good.
I'll check it out. I like Asimov.
Michael Crichton wrote one of his first novels under his actual name, Andromeda Strain, 1969. I love Michael Crichton.
nice.
I love the Andromeda Strain. It's fantastic. I love it.
I need to look something up, I need to clarify something. That story I was talking about was actually in 79. I misremembered.
You
so
son of a
wow.
bitch.
Pass.
I was gonna say anybody
We'll just edit everything out you said.
anybody that wants to read a novel that's pretty good. Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5.
Yeah,
Amount
Slaughterhouse
of
5
time.
is
It's kind of a classic and a must read for sci-fi. So if you want to get started, that's a good starting point.
So we were talking about television earlier, and I think television and film, we had moved away from the just miniatures to now we've got green screens. I think there's been some advancement in mean, there's no CG, obviously, but there's definitely advancements in the technology and the special effects. And I actually want to bring up Star Trek because some of their miniatures and some of their backdrops are amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it is really corny, but I mean, that's a budget. I mean, you're on a television show and you're on a budget.
Oh, it looks really good, especially when you watch it today. It almost looks like it is CG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some stuff holds up incredibly well. So I guess it depends on, what they were doing, but some of the practical effects were at an all-time high.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say about in the 80s. All-time high.
Well, they were higher than they had been.
Yeah. They kept getting better and better and better, and it worked well in the 60s because there was so much sci-fi, but let's speak to that because you're a Star Trek guy especially, but let's talk about some of those special effects because there was definitely a noticeable difference between the 50s and the 60s when it comes to special effects, and especially in television.
Yeah, they had to start doing that shit in color.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. One thing that they could start doing that made it...
White.
What I was going to say is it made it easier to do a lot of different stuff because color became more standard in the 60s. So they were able to play around with a lot of different stuff and make stuff look different. That's like in Star Trek, they have got all the different color uniforms, and that's why, because they wanted to show off Technicolor, and I feel like the different color palettes, or being able to use color palettes, then gave them ability to play with all kinds of different stuff and make it easier to. I forget what it's called, with the way they did the film together, where it was like multi-layered, like what you would do on a computer now, but
like a composite or something like that.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what they did for special effects.
Like a composite shot, yeah.
Yeah,
that's how they did like the Invisible Man back in the 30s.
Yeah,
and something like that. Yeah.
And I feel like it being in color made it easier to do that.
The color in Star Trek is so brilliant. And it's so, like, you watch something like, even when Lost in Space does go to color, and I have seen images of it, like, it doesn't pop. It looks
weird.
Like, it doesn't pop like
Star Trek. Because they're wearing all these dark green, like, like, they weren't prepared for color.
Yeah, Star Trek looks like a comic book.
And the bridge, oh my goodness. Like, one time I was on mushrooms, and I was watching, like, Star Trek, and it was, like, the craziest, most bonkers thing. It was so cool. I can imagine. It was so cool.
It's beautifully shot in the special effects, which are practical effects, obviously, because it's the 60s.
Yeah.
But they're done really well.
And
it's impressive.
I made that joke earlier because obviously they redid the effects on Star Trek.
Yes.
They also redid them on Next Gen a little bit.
Really?
They did. But like they completely redid some of the effects for Star Trek. And now on the Blu-rays I have, you can toggle between the original and the new ones.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's ridiculous, right? But if you watch it like streaming or something like that, you're going to get the new ones, right? Notice how Star Trek fans didn't have as much of a problem with that as Star Wars fans did. I'm just saying, who's the better fan base? Yeah.
Well, we got some. This is for the next Star Trek episode. Let's move on.
Mike, what do you think about the special effects in the 60s? Because I think we had a pretty big jump.
Well, I mean, God, what's that dude? Harryhausen, the Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah,
the stop motion.
Is it Ray Harryhausen?
It's Harryhausen.
Yeah, Ray Harryhausen and stuff like he did with Jason and the Argonauts. We get a lot of claymation, and people started adapting that. I know Robbie's probably going to talk about 2001, so I'm going to leave that to him.
We'll look at freaking.
There's some groundbreaking.
2001.
The 5 minutes of Robinson Crusoe on Mars. Just the way they had the space shuttle. And the screen on like just the multiple screens, and it's just like, okay, this is a recording feed coming from somewhere else of like this action going on the little monitor. And it's like, it's not easy, and I've done a lot of stuff like that before, and it's all of that. If you don't know what you're doing, like, you're gonna screw it up really big. And the kaiju movies with the models and the miniatures, like, that was always they kept advancing in that by leaps and bounds. So, but I was just going to say the big one for Robbie.
The models got better, but the suits got worse. And the kaiju, it felt like the budget went down. Did we spend all this money on these little buildings?
Well, they had to do it in color.
Oh.
I mean, it's easy. And like, I'm not even kidding, but Gojira in black and white with all the haze and the smoke and the building, like, it looks better because maybe we don't see as much detail. You know? Like, I don't know.
That's what I was saying about how it's kind of easier to make what you want to do with the effects look good. Was that a sentence I just said?
Yeah. Somewhat.
It's if you're trying to do something really specific, it's easier to do it in color. But if you don't do it right, it'll look better in black and white because there's not as much detail.
That's going from
like
electric guitar to acoustic guitar. Like
Okay.
I can play electric, but I use a lot of effects and fuzz to cover up my shitty playing.
Yeah, but never underestimate the importance of the acoustic guitar.
Yeah, no, but you need to be a good acoustic.
And that's
yeah.
why when Mel Brooks wanted to do Frankenstein, Young Frankenstein, as black and white, he didn't know any. Hollywood didn't have any people that could film in black and white at that point in the 70s, because they'd already abandoned it. But it's a very effective. What's that movie coming out with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson? That
The
movie,
Lighthouse.
yeah, that looks so good.
What is that in black and white?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
It's
know
black
that.
and white as fuck.
It almost looks like it almost has the appearance of something that's like almost like a silent film from like the 20s or something like that. It looks crazy.
Oh, I haven't seen.
But as for me, my favorite special effects in 60s sci-fi, I mean 2001, that's the one you're alluding to, and like 2001 special effects, like it's unfair to compare the other special effects, whether television or film, in science fiction in the 60s to 2001. Like that stuff, that shit looks realer than stuff today.
I'm trying to remember what
2001 looks more real to me than The Martian. Do you get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, like what did they do? I don't remember any special effects aside from the
they built
outside of the ship.
They built the ship
Yeah,
on this it's like a Ferris wheel.
To scale, they launched it into space just for the film.
Right? No, but they built the ship and it's on this like big rotating wheel, so they're like that's why he's able to like run, and I mean all that stuff's there. And just in like they use composite shots and stuff, but it's just how meticulous and how much of a perfectionist Kubrick is.
Yeah.
And how much detail he put into that movie, as he does all of his films, That's what makes 2001 stand out, and they don't, like, never once in 2001 do I go, that looks fake. Even when the big alien star child shows up at the end of the movie, it looks real to me.
So many other directors would have let people push them around for the budget and
They
been
would
like,
never do
okay,
that.
well, this is going to be a miniature. But no, he's like, no, let's fucking build it to scale, guys.
Like that space station they built on set.
Yeah, he
real
didn't
actual
cut corners
size.
on things, and I think that's why it holds up so incredibly well and just looks just visually amazing.
Now, I need to say, he built the ring section of it. They didn't build the whole...
Yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
saying, but there was different parts though.
Yeah,
you can tell they built like the hallways and stuff. They
Yeah.
could have done more miniatures and got away with it.
And the scene when Dave finally comes across the monolith outside the orbit of Jupiter, right? And he basically goes through that acid trip scene. Do you know what I'm talking about?
yeah.
I think all that's hand drawn, isn't it?
No, I mean it's done practically because it's like them dropping like inks into like water or something like that, because it's like a smear pattern that's coming across when he's like going through the space warp or whatever. I was just gonna say, one time I was on mushrooms and I watched that scene and it was bonkers crazy. Also though, Robinson Crusoe on Mars, do not sleep on this movie. This movie has amazing special effects, and for our scientific knowledge of Mars at the time, it's actually beyond that. And it's really crazy how it's got some moments in there. You know what I'm saying? Like the way this dude finds out it's the original. If you guys have never seen this movie.
That's one
No.
I haven't seen.
It's kind of like the original version of The Martian. It is literally Robinson Crusoe on Mars. It's the same story and everything, right? But he goes there. And,
Also, one of those random things they threw out in the 60s. Let's try this.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it looks so good. There's a monkey in the film. It's great.
Of course.
I'm not even kidding. The monkey is the best part of the
Was
film.
the monkey on Mars already?
No, that goes with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But Adam West doesn't make it. Spoilers. But anyway, the way that they filmed it, it looks amazing. It doesn't look as good as something like 2001, obviously, but also just the idea of how advanced some of their thinking about Mars was, because we still had a lot of not real information and an understanding of Mars and its planet and its
Little green
surface and all that
people.
stuff, and the canals and all that stuff. And they reference some of that in there, but. And there's a bit in there where, like, the way he finds that he can have an oxygen supply is that there's these certain yellow rocks there, and if he burns them, they release oxygen. So, yeah, that's obviously not true.
I mean, who knows?
No, but the special effects in that movie look amazing. It's on Criterion, so that tells you something, too.
Oh, yeah.
I highly encourage you to check out that movie.
If I knew it was on Criterion, I would have definitely gone out of my way to check it out. 'Cause
What do you-
I'm familiar with it, but I've never actually watched it.
What are some of your favorites, John?
The special effects
Yeah.
of the 60s? I would say...
They use computer rotoscoping and hand-drawn effects. Yeah, for that. Yeah, I get what you're saying. But, like, some of it was, like, for the 2001 trippy scene, like, they're, like, dropping like ink into like water or something like that. You know the scene I'm talking about. You see all these smidgens of colors, and it's like on a double screen, and they do it on glass or something like that. Yeah, it's wild.
It's Joe Donaldson was the one that was responsible for all that. So that guy is out there.
Nice way to be on point.
I don't know, nothing specific. I mean, Space Odyssey is amazing and gorgeous, but we talked about that.
And you said you love Star Trek.
I do love Star Trek, and I'm just surprised. Yeah, I realize, I mean, if you watch the new stuff, they've updated some of the stuff, but the original show had amazing effects for television, and there's the occasional where, like, oh, that's just a goddamn, you can tell where they repurpose things.
That's a dog with a horn.
Yeah, you can tell where they clearly repurposed some shit, man. But at the same time,
they're just 20 miles outside of L.A. there.
Yeah. Like, that's just
Why are they in the same rock quarry every episode?
But some of the stuff's really good. I mean, I think I associate the 60s with basically being the 50s shows, but in color. But reality was there's definitely some step up in special effects. They have improved. I really think the 80s was like the penultimate special effects when it comes to practical effects.
Yeah.
And then we started going CG, and not for initially in the 90s, that was most of it shit. But the 60s, though, there was great improvement, and there's a noticeable mark, because even the show had stuff shows, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, had some stuff that was pretty remarkable for television at the time.
That opening of Twilight Zone.
The door floating around.
Yeah.
I bet someone passed out when they first saw that.
Even though he prefers the original opening, which Rod Serling in a bathtub, like, hey, you caught me at a bad time. While you're here, let me tell you about this.
You cheeky monkey.
Let me tell you about this story.
Now, one thing that's really cool, because Justin brings up the whole idea of everything being in color.
He is a racist.
When it goes from he's not. But when everything goes from color to black and white, a lot of the backgrounds that you see are actually hand painted. Like, it's a huge on cloth, and you don't see that in black and white, but you finally see it in color. And I mean,
you see that in black and white matte paintings.
Well, they did.
No,
like
the backdrop. We're in a screen. We're in a room filming, and it's like this painting of outer space or on Mars. Like, it's the backdrop.
The matte paintings, man.
Yeah.
They did that in black and white, dude.
When you actually can see it in color, it looks like it's.
They look amazing.
It looks amazing, and some of those.
Do you know what movie has some great matte paintings? Robinson Crusoe on Mars.
But you don't, like I said, you can see it. You don't get the full detail in black and white. You get a lot of that in color, and that's a lot of talent.
Different medium.
Stuff in color does have more detail.
And they used matte paintings all the way up until like the mid '90s or early 2000s before everything just kind of went to straight CGI.
Yeah.
And filming on location, so you lost that.
Because matte paintings started looking worse and worse.
But you lost that effect. Like, it looked wonderful in Jurassic Park. Because you can't even tell, but that's a lot of that's matte painting, and it's beautiful.
I think Lord of the Rings was the last hurrah for practical effects. Sometimes,
and that was just half, and even that was half and half.
Yeah, but the blending of it, that's why Del Toro films look so well. Like Pan's Labyrinth or Hellboy, like Hellboy 2 in particular, because there's like a blending of it, and it works.
Modern Star Wars uses the same thing with practical effects. And CGI.
A little bit. I
would say, actually, the new ones especially brought back a lot of. We're jumping off track, but they did bring a lot of practical effects back, because they did feel that Lucas's newer stuff was too CG, and you can tell. And that's why the new films look so good.
Yet still nobody hates the prequels as much as they hate the new ones, do they? Isn't that crazy?
I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand.
I think no matter what you think about the story or the characters or the development of Last Jedi, that is the most beautiful looking Star Wars movie.
The fighting outside is so visual treat.
Oh my god.
I'll take that over, whatever the fuck.
That shitty ass Sarlacc pit with 3 teeth.
Yeah, I prefer the original Sarlacc pit over the CGI one that they did.
Yeah.
Wow, we really jumped ship. We're gonna take a little break. When we come back, we'll talk about our top 5. I think maybe Robbie has some social media. I think he reached out to see what people's favorite 60s sci-fi.
You know it.
And he also asked them their favorite Pop-Tart flavor. So when we come back on Pop Culture Philosophers, 60s Sci-Fi. Welcome back to Pop Culture Philosophers. We're talking about our favorite taco toppings. I think Robbie with the guacamole, which is I understand it's
that's
like
nowhere near.
more of a burrito topping.
Hot sauce is my favorite taco
okay.
topping, homie.
So we're actually talking about 60s Sci-Fi and our favorite toppings on 60s Sci-Fi. So we're talking about 60s Sci-Fi. We're talking about our favorite movies, our favorite shows. Well, actually, we haven't talked about our favorite movies, but we're going to get to that in a second. But first, Robbie, I think you reached out to the social medias, the
Yes,
Twitters and the Twatters and the Facebooks and everything.
Excuse me?
What did you say?
And you asked them their favorite films. I'm interested to hear what they say. I think we'll have some
Yes.
overlap here.
Yeah, okay. So,
Since only released 4 films in the 60s.
yeah, right.
They were
Okay.
science fiction.
No kidding. So the first ones of these come from the live stream that I do every Sunday night, Rockin' Robbie Live, 7 o'clock U.S. Central Time. Central Time.
Yeah, you're not in Central Guam. You're in
PM.
Central U.S.
PM.
Wait, is Guam a territory? Anyway.
It is, yeah. Anyway,
Time is Chicago.
so we had some homies over at the live stream give us their top favorite 60s sci-fi movie. Slime says 2001.
Is that his birth name? Slime.
I don't know. I hope so. Flicking Stuff says 2001 and Planet of the Apes. And Roger said Barbarella.
I was wondering if Barbara was going to make somebody's
You know, it
top.
always makes me think of that Duran Duran song they did when they came back in the 90s, the Electric Barbarella. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. From the PCP Army, we got some awesome responses. B-Dubs, Billy Wilburn said Doctor Who and the Daleks. That's right. James Donahoe said 2001. Paul Druth said 2001. Nick Mastermico, writer of the Grey Ghost saga, said King Kong versus Godzilla. Or more accurately, I should say, Godzilla versus King Kong. I don't know why I read that backwards. Fantastic Voyage is his other pick. Clem Urban says Planet of the Apes. Randy Riley says Fantastic Voyage. And L.W. Allen over at Dance Panda Comics says Planet of the Apes. Not as many responses as we usually have. I think it's because there's not that many.
I thought Fantastic Voyage was a Coolio song.
Yeah, right. You messed up my joke. One thing I will point out, James Donahoe said he's going to go with 2001, but it was a great decade for sci-fi and film.
Hey,
And I disagree, homie.
What?
that original one was King Kong versus Godzilla.
Oh, so I did say it right.
Yeah.
Ah, damn.
Did you have it written down backwards?
I wrote it the way I'm pretty sure I wrote it the way whatever. It doesn't matter. Y'all know the movie I'm talking about.
Godzilla's the better. I'm going to go with Godzilla being better. Sorry.
Yeah,
Godzilla's
but it
better.
seems like the overwhelming pick is 2001, and Paul Druid even said it was unfair.
Yeah, it really is. It's almost cheating.
He said
That
the
you
only
have to
ones that
compete
came
against
close
that.
were Alphaville, which is a French film by Godard that
Yeah,
I haven't seen yet,
I heard that was an amazing film.
and Planet of the Apes. He said those are the only ones that came close. I disagree, but we'll see.
All right, I'm interested to hear the folks here at PCP, the people on the podcast today, your top 5, because I don't think there's a lot of great standouts, but there is a variety of films. I'm interested to see what you guys. There's a lot of goddamn kaiju. There's a lot. 60 was kaiju heavy. We could have just done kaiju in this episode. It probably wouldn't have been as deep, talking about AI and shit like that, but
It probably would have just been as deep as far as themes and motif go. And then we have the idea of the Japanese response to a post-Hiroshima Nagasaki world and their place in it during the Cold War. Dude, we should do another kaiju episode.
I think you're overthinking how
Dudes.
deep some of these Godzilla films are. So I'm
They're
actually going to
pretty
start
deep. They're pretty
with
deep, man.
Sir Goldsmith. He was knighted during the break.
It was,
Sir Goldsmith.
boy, are
by
my
an
wings tired.
alternate reality version
Yeah.
of the British Empire, which was originally taken over by Sicilian aliens. And I totally stole that idea from Warren Ellis's authorities. Go on.
Yeah, that's why he has a long Italian mustache now. As soon as he was knighted, fluffy mustache.
Your mustache, by the way, is the most mighty I have ever seen it tonight.
Oh, thank you.
It
I'm
is-
getting it ready
I
for.
am so jealous.
I'm getting it ready for Dragon Con.
I thought you were going somewhere else completely.
Where are you going to be?
What are you going to do with that mustache?
I'm doing Hopper PI.
Nice. I want
Stranger
pictures.
Things.
Pictures.
Oh, there'll be pictures.
Yeah, post
There'll
them in
be
the
pictures.
PCP Army.
And
All right.
there will be mustache rides. Okay. Your top 5, you can narrow it down to top 5. Now, I know initially you kind of, the whole thing was spurred by the Star Trek show. But what if did you narrow it down to 5 science fiction movies that you love in reverse order, starting with number 5, if you could?
Number 5, I remember seeing when I was a kid don't remember it so well, other than it was the original version.
Your dad's
of
penis.
my
We've all seen it as kids. It happens at one
Goddamn,
time. His pants are loose. You look. You don't mean to look.
It's 2019, John. Let's move on. Come on.
It scarred me for life.
This was the original version of one of my favorite movies when I was a kid.
Oh my God.
Called Inner Space.
Oh,
with Martin Short.
I know. Yeah. So Inner Space was definitely inspired by
Fantastic Voyage.
Fantastic Voyage, the Coolio song.
Yes. It's like it's a Cold War story. They're bringing a scientist to the U.S. from Russia, I think, and he has like a heart attack or something on the plane, a brain aneurysm, yeah. And so they shrink down some scientists and go in to fix the blood clot or whatever.
Which is straight up an episode of Archer, by the way. They go to fix his blood clot. Remember that? That is straight up a ripoff of Fantastic Voyage.
Yeah, and Inner Space, starring Martin Short and Dennis Quaid. Yeah.
The comic book from the 60s.
Yeah.
My number 4 is, I'm not sure which one of the Gamera movies, but one of those I really liked. I saw it was really
Did you say Gamera?
Gamera.
Gamera. You're thinking of Gamora from, I think, from Marvel.
I said Gamera, right?
We just got to make Gamera
Gamera.
great
It's like
again.
camera with a
Make
G.
Gamera. There's also, I gotta say, there's a version of one of these Gamera movies on YouTube available for you to watch right now, where they dubbed over it in English with redneck voices. Get drunk, watch that.
Is that the only version you've seen? I want to be honest. Be honest with the viewers.
No, I've seen both.
Listeners, okay.
I've seen both.
You've seen the original?
Yes. My number 3, Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
Great. What great
Get
special
your damn
effects.
dirty ape, damn dirty ape hand.
Mike looked it up earlier. It was get your paws.
Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape.
Yeah.
But they don't have
that flows a lot better.
I knew it was damn dirty apes.
They referenced it in Clerks even, and I forgot it.
My number 2, Last Man on Earth. And number 1, obviously, 2001.
A Space Odyssey.
A Space Odyssey.
I think a lot of people, it's going to be on their top 5. If not their number 1, it will definitely be in their top 5. That's a great top 5. When's the last time you saw a Space Odyssey? Be honest with the viewers.
I think last year.
Okay. It holds up well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Special effects. The Blu-ray, by the way, they did a really good job with the Blu-ray. Maybe because it lends itself well. Obviously, it shot on film. There wasn't digital, but it was shot in this. It was shot so well. I mean, they did a good job with the transfer. It's beautiful on Blu-ray. You can get it for like less than $10. We should plug that shit on the show somewhere from Amazon, and it's amazing. It should be in your collection. If you have a Blu-ray player, and why wouldn't you? We live in the future. You should have 2001 should be in your collection, bar none. No reason it shouldn't be.
It's got one of my favorite shooting styles for a sci-fi movie, and it's one of the reasons why I loved Gravity so much. Sandra Bullock.
Oh, I thought you meant the actual force of gravity.
Other
than the fact that it keeps you from floating away.
It's, I don't want to say it's easier to make it look better, but there's less stuff to look shitty because it's just a straight black background with like some stars in it and maybe a planet every once in a while. But it's really cool to see. It's just really simple, and it looks really good.
It's a visual treat. It is simplified, but it works, and it's the story's great, the writing's great, the acting's great. It's fucking Kubrick, man. Yeah. It's almost unfair to. I feel bad for these other people who had to compete against them on the show tonight. So I apologize to the other writers and directors and other people. Mikey, your top 5. You can narrow it down to top 5 in reverse order if you could, sir. I have a feeling 2001 is maybe not on your list.
It's not on my list.
Holy shit.
Yeah, believe it or not, I don't think the 15 minutes that I've seen or 5 or whatever.
That's fair. You're like, hey, I haven't clearly seen this all the way through, so I'm not going to judge it, and I'm not going to just throw it in there to appease the audience.
So my number 5 is The Computer That Wore Tennis Shoes, the Kurt Russell classic.
Kurt Russell Disney film.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Holy shit, yeah.
I love that movie. I used to watch that movie all the time when I was a kid. I love that stupid-ass movie.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
For some reason, I always thought it was a 70s film. That's a 60s film.
1969.
Wow.
My number 4 is The Son of Flubber, another Disney film with Fred McMurray. Going off...
What a weird hodgepodge. Wow, you're really throwing me off here. I expected... some of the ones that he mentioned or I was going to mention be in your top 5, and so far
mine is completely different than everybody's.
Wow!
Because my number 3 is the first one. It's this. So The Son of Flubber is essentially the football game But the original Absent-Minded Professor, where Flubber is created, it's the basketball game and the flying Model T. Fred McMurray, it's a classic.
Yeah.
Wait, Flubber? Wait, that movie's from the 60s?
Yeah.
I thought it was the 50s for some reason.
1961 is Absent-Minded
All
Professor.
right. Holy
Nice.
shit.
I think 63
That's a
or
classic.
64 is.
Yeah, I've watched that
Son
as
of
a
Flubber.
kid. How many times did I fucking watch that movie?
So many times. That's why it's on my top 5.
Yeah.
I rented it on accident when I was a kid, thinking it was a Robin Williams one. It was good though. I loved
That's
it.
great. What was that number? Those 3. So number two would be Gamora, whatever.
It's Gamera. It's goddamn Gamera.
Yeah, I like the turtle. I never watched the Godzilla. Like I've always heard about Godzilla, and then the Blue Oyster Cult song. So I've heard it, but then it's like, cool. It's a monster movie. I never watched it before. Which one is it? Like? And it's Gamera. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. So I have love in my heart more for Gamera than I do Godzilla.
So that's how you're
Yeah.
introduced to kaiju was Gamera.
Gamera, yeah. But they don't have. I got the Godzilla here. I don't have a Gamera.
They have
yet.
some. I think Rivoltech and there's some expensive Gamera, but he's not as commonplace or as popular as Godzilla. I'll be honest with you.
We bought a collection full of toys, and it had the Gamera Revoltech in there, so I own it now. So,
oh, you do have it.
I have.
Oh, nice. Where the hell was that at? You should have brought that today.
I left work late, and then that was what I had. So my buddy Sam brought it to me, so I just brought it with me. My number 1, it's kind of a tie.
You son of a bitch.
Well, because everybody in the PCP Army has voted that it's not a sci-fi film. I was going to say Dr. Strangelove, because everything that we've talked about earlier, it kind of fits in there. So to appease the fans and Robbie, it's been since 5 o'clock when we're like, hey, this is what
I know
it's gonna be.
you guys kept arguing back and forth.
In
I'm
the
trying
first
to
segment,
work.
yeah.
I keep getting messages.
He kept sending. He's like, just ask him. I was like, no, it's fine. It's fine, whatever. And then you're like, yeah, sure. And then Justin's like, okay, here it is. I'm like, sweet, I win. And then you're like, no, I don't know.
And if you listeners will go back to the first segment, you'll notice there's about a good 2 or 3 minutes where they're going back and forth on
I'm
this.
being a little bit passive aggressive about it.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here, just staring Robbie down.
I went to the PCP Army and I set up a poll. I was like, yo, is Dr. Strangelove
Did you
sci-fi?
really?
Yeah.
What'd they say?
No.
Oh,
It's like 13-7.
Oh,
So-
that's a pretty good margin there. So it's not apparently to them.
Right.
So what would you so it was supposed to be Doctor Strangelove, but if it was not,
so I'm
what would
gonna
it be?
play by the rules. I'm not gonna be a rogue.
You can say whatever you want. That's the rules.
Well,
man.
no, but like you said, everybody voted it down, though it is. But I was going to say Fahrenheit 451 to be my number 1.
Okay, that's
So
a good
the Roger-
adaptation.
The
of
Roger
book.
Was film.
Was it originally your number 2? And
Uh,
those
Roger
other
Moore
ones?
actually in there?
No, it was a joke
Huh?
from 9/11. Fahrenheit 9/11.
Time Machine was my number 2. Was originally going to be my number 2. So I added in the computer that wore tennis shoes because I forgot about that one. I was like, oh crap.
Mike's
So
confused
I had
everybody
it
now.
in.
Yeah.
So no, I've got my list right here of.
So what is your number 1? Doctor Strangelove,
No.
Time Machine, or tennis that wore tennis shoes?
No, number
What?
number
The tennis that wore computer shoes.
number 6 is the Time Machine, and Fahrenheit 451.
There you
and
go.
Dr. Strangelove share from first place.
I'll allow it.
I don't allow it because Doctor
We do this
Strangelove is
every
not
episode.
a science fiction.
Because 3 out of 4 ain't bad.
So
Y'all let us
that's
know
a
in the
good-
comments.
That's a good top 6. That's an
Y'all
interesting.
are surprised by the
Honestly-
Disney films.
honestly,
know.
There's
I
a lot
am,
of talking
actually.
over people right now, y'all.
I'm surprised by the
I'm just
Disney
speaking
films.
out for the viewers right now, the listeners, whatever they want to be called. I don't give a shit.
Depends if they're blind or not.
Well, just have them play it in reverse, and they'll get the satanic message.
Yes.
Whose turn is it?
Now nobody's going to talk.
I was just gonna say I surprised everybody with the
You did.
with the Disney
Yeah,
film.
yeah, that
definitely
was
did.
really nice.
You were
that was, that was
Disney.
a,
It's got to be something more than 2001.
that was a great top 6.
Their favorites, not whatever you.
It was
say.
Disney heavy.
With the Flubber thing, you reminded me of one that I had on my list earlier that I deleted on accident, and it's not on there anymore.
I was so afraid that you were going to say one of those, or
No.
the Nutty Professor, because that
was it.
That's my number 7.
That was supposed to be my top 5, or
Jerry
it was
Lewis
earlier.
classic.
All right, but back in this reality.
Yes.
Robbie, I'm interested to hear your top 5.
Oh, yeah,
I know
okay.
one of them. 100%. I know.
I'm
one
sure
of them.
you do. You
But I
might
don't
know a
know-
couple of them.
I don't know the other ones.
My
Maybe
number
I do. Maybe I
5.
do.
My number 5 is directed by Richard Fleischer, 1966, Fantastic Voyage. I rewatched it over the last 2 nights. It's incredibly boring. nowadays.
It is.
It really is. But the special effects look amazing.
And it's an interesting concept. Everybody was going sci-fi, and they're like, let's go into the person's
Yeah,
body.
everybody's going outer space. Let's go to inner space.
It's a really cool.
Have you seen Inner Space?
Now, I like Inner Space way better. Of course, you got
Yeah.
the advantage of having Martin Short there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I do like the movie. I think it looks great. Donald Pleasance is so earnest in that movie. He's earnest in every damn movie he's in, is he not?
Yeah.
Except for when Ernest goes to camp.
Yes. Number 4.
Fuck you, John.
Directed by George Powell, my pal George, from 1960, The Time Machine.
The Time Machine.
Yeah, I love H.G. Wells. I love that story, the novella.
I love that H.G. Wells' book is based on him going back. I mean, it's just his character's H.G.
Yeah.
Wells, is right. He's like, I'll just be the fucking guy.
Yeah, and it's written on the little... Anyway, I love the design of the Time Machine. I love the way it looks. I love the message. I love how they brought it into the idea of 1960. Of course, they would have started production in the 50s, right? But it's about the humanity. And we were talking about this a little bit in the first block about the themes and stuff about the idea that mankind's not going to get over itself. You know, and that I just love that story. I think that's a great movie. It's way better than the Guy Pearce one.
It is. It's shot
Way
really
better.
well. It's shot really well. The special effects are great for the time.
Yeah.
And great cast. I forget, what was that actor's name?
His name
I
is
have to look him up.
I didn't write it down.
From
I
what?
thought I had it written
What's
down.
it-
From the Time Machine,
What are the blue creatures called?
the Morlocks.
The Morlocks scared the shit out of me.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
dude,
they got
they
those
were creepy as
They
shit.
got those glowing eyes. It's super
freaked
creepy.
me out.
Speaking
I
of
think they
creepy,
inspired
sleep for like 2
Blanca
days.
from the Street Fighter.
speaking of creepy, my number 3 is it's an Italian sci-fi horror film directed by Mario Bava from 1965. It's called Planet of the Vampires. I
That's
love
so
this
funny.
movie.
I just threw that out like for jokes.
Yeah, no, I love this movie. I have loved this movie for so long. Do you get the name?
I did. I closed it. I was just gonna say that I saw that earlier and it looked really good.
It's okay. It's not good.
They,
It's like it's
they
not
did
good.
a 4K rematch. It's a French movie, right?
It's an Italian
Italian.
film. Yeah.
Oh, I might be thinking.
You're
of a
close.
different
They're
one.
both in Europe.
Yeah, they're both in Europe,
yeah.
and they kind of look like a
No,
boob. Anyway,
They both love cheese.
no, but I really like it. It's not necessarily the greatest film, and I even tweeted this out. What I tweeted was, if a movie has an effective use of color, even if it's bad, it automatically goes from an F or a D to a C.
Yeah,
right?
it's a visual treat.
Yeah,
for your
right?
eyes.
And by the way, I'm watching Planet of the Vampires. I love this movie. AMC used to do this thing called Monster Fest, Fear Friday type stuff,
Oh, yeah,
right?
I remember that.
I used to record that on VHS back in the early 2000s when we still had VHS, John, right? We used to hang out back in those days.
I remember that.
We used to go walking at 4 a.m. Anyway, that was one of the movies that I wound up recording, and I watched it, and it's bad and it's stupid, and I love it. It has nothing to do with vampires, but it's about this team of scientists or astronauts, and they crash land on this planet, and there's these disembodied forces, and they take over the dead members from the crew that died when they went out to explore. They take over their bodies, and then they basically succeed. And it's got one of those cool endings where like you think the heroes have won, but the heroes have actually now been taken over by the people of the Planet of the Vampires or whatever they're called. And I just love it. It's such a visual treat. I love the colors in that movie. It's amazing. I went on for a long time about that. Number 2, 1964, directed by Byron Haskin, Robinson Crusoe on Mars. It's a great film. It looks great. Some of the science holds up. Some of it, of course, doesn't. But it's a really fun film. It's Robinson Crusoe on Mars. Literally. It's great. I highly encourage you to watch it.
Yeah, we didn't know shit about Mars in the 60s, so the fact that they got any of that right would be impressive.
I mean, this is before we landed there. 2001 is my number 1. From 1968, Stanley Kubrick. We've talked a lot about this film. This is one of my favorite films of all time, John. It's not just my favorite 60s sci-fi film. It's my favorite sci-fi film.
Yeah, it's definitely my favorite Kubrick film.
It's one of my favorite films. It's definitely top 3. It's between that, Dazed and Confused, and Citizen Kane. But I love all 3 of those movies for different reasons. 2001 would inspire me more as a person. I love that film. I love the mystery of it. I love the intense detail of it. I love the special effects. I love HAL 9000, or some of our friends would say HAL 9000. Never mind. I really, really like that movie, and I think it's Kubrick's
German
best.
joke?
I think it's Kubrick's best film.
It is a great film. Visually, it's a treat. It holds up well. It is slow paced, so I think if you've never seen the film, it's because it's building. It's an amazing film, and they're building this great story.
Yeah.
Kubrick was a hell of a storyteller, and you're right. We talked about this earlier, and it feels like it's a love fest to this film most of the episode. But it's just such a great film, and it's done so well, and he's so meticulous in what he does.
Yes.
And it shows.
And And once again, one time I was doing psychedelic mushrooms, and I watched that film, and it blew my mind. It changed my world.
How long was the opening sequence when you were on mushrooms?
4 hours. It feels like
It felt to me like I didn't watch the entire movie, to be honest with you. Like, I remember skipping through to certain scenes. Some of it felt very dark for some of the people that were around me, and I get that.
Yeah.
The movie can be pretty scary because it deals with like an existential like idea of who we are and everything,
Yeah.
you know, and how little we are, but how even the smallest seed can turn into a mountain. As Jesus said, right? And that's what Kubrick was trying to get us to understand. Is what Jesus said.
Did he say that?
He said if you have faith at the seed of a mustard, like a mustard seed, it can grow into a mountain. But like the point being, the smallest little start can lead into the biggest thing. And that's our existence.
Yeah. But that can also be twofold. It can lead to something terrible. It can lead to something good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Something can spiral out of
Oh,
control.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
I think it's interesting that you went that way with it.
So that's a great top 5. I noticed he didn't do a top 6.
what's
I
your
didn't know he didn't argue over the number 1
No honorable
being a
mentions?
sci-fi.
If I did an honorable mention, it would be the fact that I don't like Planet of the Apes.
Do you
Notice it was not on there.
Also, back
wasn't
to the
on mine.
point that I've made a couple times tonight, one of those random fucking things that they just threw out in the 60s, a planet full of 8 people.
Yeah. And vampires that weren't vampires. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird shit.
I think they got LSD, man.
Well, yeah, right? Yeah. What's your top 5, John?
Number 5 would be Curse of the Fly. This is the third of the Fly films. So the first one, classic, everybody knows it, Vincent Price.
That's the one with Eric Stoltz.
God damn it. That's just the Fly too, and that was the 80s. But anyway, and so the first one's a classic, Vincent Price. Great special effects, great writing, great everything. The second one, meh, okay. Vincent Price is in it. He's the big draw point. It's not color. They went black and white because of the budget. So people forget the 60s, you know, movies that had a tighter budget were black and white, and then movies that had more money were color. And so this was the third film. Vincent Price is not in it, so it's missing the great Vincent Price, but it's a better story than the second one, and it's about the grandkids and their experiments with the time machine, the machine, the transporter, and unfortunately, it's marred by some really shitty effects because the budget was like $4, and 2 of that was for takeout. But the cast is great. The film is enjoyable.
That $4 would be like $12 today.
Yeah. See, it's still an enjoyable film. I've enjoyed the Fly films. It's still better. The Curse of the Fly is still better than the Fly 2 from the 80s with Eric Stoltz. Number 4 would be Gamera. That's how you pronounce his name. The turtle from space that came down and basically. So it's basically it's a knockoff Godzilla. I mean, come after Godzilla. It's kind of the Godzilla wannabe, but it's great in its own way. And then eventually it became friends of this kid. I mean, the story evolves later on in subsequent sequels, but in the first film, he's basically comes down from God knows nowhere, come to find out he's from space, and he's just terrorizing. He's just terrorizing things, destroying things. They have to get tanks, and he's awesome. He's terrifying. He's got these big-ass, and he always remains that way. He's got these big-ass fangs. He's basically a turtle with like a saber-toothed turtle, and he's amazing looking. And but I love the fact that when he flies, it just doesn't fly away. He spins like a goddamn UFO and flies away because he's got a turtle shell. He goes into his turtle shell and spins around. I love that.
One of my favorite things is seeing John on like 5 Bud Light Limes talking about Gamera.
Number 3 is going to be Godzilla Monster Zero. This is the one where he fought King Ghidorah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It was called Monster Zero, but we all know him as King Ghidorah.
Did you like him in the new movie?
I did like him.
He was scary.
There was a lot of complaints about the previous Godzilla, the American Godzilla, that, there's not enough Godzilla and there's too much talking, which I understand. And the new movie, like, there's too much monsters and not enough story. God, shut the fuck up.
I mean, it's true, though.
Well, they tried to answer they tried to people's complaints, and it's King of Monsters, right? They're trying to give you...
But then don't give me a human story if it's going to be dumb.
There's a little bit.
It's dumb, though.
And it's barely in there.
Chow Yun-Fat's whole thing where he has to go to the center of the earth and, like, pray to the Godzilla, it's so stupid. Why is Millie Bobby Brown in there? Because Stranger Things is a hit and she's going to scream. That's why.
Yeah. I do...
There's no reason.
I think the fights, though, were awesome. And the monsters are awesome.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah.
You cut that down to an hour and 15-minute movie, and I'll love it.
It looks great in 3D.
Yeah, cut together your version, the PCP cut.
Okay.
Did you go to the Monaco to watch it in that big
No, I only go to Hollywood here in town.
I saw it at the Monaco at their big special thing. It's pretty cool.
Okay. I'll pick it up on Blu-ray and watch it in 3D at my house. So I enjoyed it. It was a fun film. Anyway, so that Monster Zero. That again, we got King Ghidorah gets introduced. He obviously is in subsequent films, but this is introduction. It's a good film. Now I realize that there's a lot of Godzilla films, so this could have been a Godzilla heavy-handed. But eventually in the 60s, I'm not knocking Godzilla because he's the not exactly the original, but he's the kaiju. You know what I'm saying? As much as I love Gamera, I have a soft spot for big turtles. But it became like Monster of the Week. And then we won't even talk about the fucking baby kid Godzilla.
Godzuki.
God, I hate that. Son of a bitch.
Godzuki.
Anyway, number 2, Planet of the Apes. I obviously enjoy it more than Robbie. I think the practical effects are good. I think it's a cool concept. I think the twist, the end, which is obviously used in pop culture. Charlton Heston's overacting is great. It's an enjoyable film. It's not going to change the way films are made, but it's a cool film. I think the original is better than Tim Burton's take on it. I enjoyed it a lot. I think the special effects
It is better than Tim Burton's take. Like, no lie.
Yeah.
No lie.
And the special effects look
you know,
practical effects are good.
And they are. And I hear that the new ones with like James Franco and beyond, like that, they are really good.
They are good.
Dawn, Rise, War.
Yeah, they
whatever.
did a good job taking that franchise, relaunching it, and doing a good job with it. Relaunching a franchise that I thought was dead.
When I was a kid, I was fascinated with Planet of the Apes because of the effects. They were so effective. They looked so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was the only that was one thing I remember when I was a kid was that it always bothered me in the like Power Rangers and lower budget stuff that when these monsters that were clearly wearing masks would talk and their mouths didn't move. It really bothered me, and the mouths moved in Planet of the Apes.
Well, the thing I got to tell you about Power Rangers, which you're actually referring to Super Sentai, because that's the original form where the monsters came from. They make a new one of those every week, homie. Okay, so you make it.
And
fucking
Goldar
talk.
was there every fucking week, and he had a rubber mask, and his mouth just kind of went in and out instead of.
No, his mouth moved. Yeah.
Oh, Goldar's did. I'm thinking of one of the other. I don't know what the fuck I'm thinking
Dude,
of.
they had to create a
The
new
Ewoks
monster.
movie. There was, you know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of movies that use those rubber
I'm
masks.
just gonna say before you go to your number one. Super Sentai, since the mid '70s, has made a different monster every fucking week. You make it fucking talk. Go ahead, John.
Man, you got all the things to bring up and rile them about.
I got a number 7 to add.
Oh, my God. I will come over there and cut your wiener off.
I turned his mic off. Go ahead.
The Misadventures of Merlin Jones. Another Disney great.
God damn it. Is your stuff all Disney?
He's just on Disney's Wikipedia page right now. Go on.
I'm standing firm on the greatest thing they've done prior to the acquisition of Marvel and Star Wars is Tron, and I'm not going to budge.
Jesus Christ, dude. That's not a 60s sci-fi movie. What's your number one? It can't be Tron.
My number one is a film that you guys, we haven't even talked about tonight.
Oh, my.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
We could just do a whole podcast about that.
Could.
Dude.
We Kubrick needs his own podcast, and we could do that. We'll do it after the Michael Keaton podcast.
Maybe before.
Okay.
Maybe a couple years before.
We have talked about doing directors, and we did Spielberg, and we did Ridley Scott.
Yeah.
If anybody
We did Wes Anderson.
We haven't done Wes Anderson. Not on this show.
Oh,
yeah, we did the SOE, but he's done like
Wes
3 or 4
Anderson needs his own show, but
so does
before we do
Scorsese.
Wes and Scorsese, but before we get to those guys, I really think we need to do a Kubrick one.
That's a great idea.
I think Kubrick goes down as one of the greatest directors of all
Okay,
time.
if I'm
you down
on,
to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm on that one, then I'll watch 2001.
You
Mike's
ain't gonna
not
be on
allowed.
it.
Mike's not allowed. No, I'm kidding.
We'll be like, Dr. Strangelove does not count as a Stanley Kubrick film.
Boo.
Did he do any Disney movies?
No, he didn't do anything.
Yeah, Lolita.
Man, I did not have time to watch anything, so I'm just going off my memory in the past, the things that I loved when I was a kid.
Same.
We got our top,
I think everybody had a great top 5.
I think. Well, Mike's for shit.
I was more original than 2001. I mean, Jesus.
No, but aside from 2001, we all had different top 5s, man.
Yeah, I was surprised how varied it was.
John had a Fly movie on his. I had Planet Vampires.
A movie I talked shit about earlier.
Justin had something.
I never knew we were going to have on your top
We had
5.
Inner Space, I think.
Fantastic Voyage.
Voyage.
So did
which
I.
You had too.
We had number 5. Yeah, see?
Fantastic Five.
I think me and you overlap more than anybody else.
Voyage. Voyage was on my list.
And a lot more things in life than just movie taste.
Yeah, penises. Fantastic Voyage was on my list, but when I was like, well, Cujo's Cujo.
Cujo.
John has had like what? How many Bud Light limes have you had?
5. That's 5. I just felt like if I added kaiju, it would be kaiju heavy, and I did only have 2 kaiju on there, so I'm proud of myself. But there was, we take out the kaiju, it would have been like Fantastic Voyage is a great film.
Yeah, it is. It's boring though when you watch it now.
It's slow paced.
Yeah.
It was boring when I watched it as a fucking kid. Who we fooling? But it's a cool concept, and again, it's something different than all the other space stuff at the time.
And Don Pleasance is in it, right?
Oh, Donnie P.
I highly encourage anybody who's not part of our Patreon to go ahead and get on patreon.com/PCP, help support this channel. And one of the things that you get access to is the PCP After Hours podcast. That's right. We're about to be wrapping up the show. But right after that, we're going to keep the mics live for about 15 to 20 minutes, and we're going to talk about some stuff, including Sony, Marvel, Spider-Man, Disney. I don't know what that's going to involve. We're going to be talking about some new Disney Plus shows like Moon Knight, She-Hulk, Miss Marvel, what we think about that. And we're going to be talking about that Mandalorian trailer. And I will encourage you to remember this. Right now, John is on his 5th Bud Light Lime. He's going to be on number 6 when we do PCP After Hours. You definitely want to be there for that.
And I've got a funny story to tell in After Hours of why we've never done a Kubrick podcast.
Okay. So we're going to wrap up the show. Final thoughts, folks, gentlemen. Start with Goldsmith. He's an actor.
Is Airplane 2 a prequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Yes.
The bigger question is, since airplanes are a result of science, is Airplane 2 a science fiction film?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's in a space shuttle.
Space shuttle.
It's more of a science fiction show than Doctor Strangelove.
Okay. Honestly, I've never seen Airplane 2, so I didn't know it was in the space shuttle.
It actually is in space.
It's like Airplane.
I didn't know that.
It's Airplane, but there's a space shuttle instead.
I've never seen that one.
It's America's first commercial space.
So the first airplane. So you were trying to make a joke. When reality is, that's the one that is. I mean, the first one's
really
definitely
funny.
not sci-fi, but the second one is sci-fi.
That's really funny.
Yeah, because Captain Kirk is in it.
Yeah, a bobby pin.
And you think he's on that
seen
port, and he's just behind that door. You think he's on like some sort of communicator, and he's on a door. Oh man, communicator door jokes. Let's.
Whose
talk
final
about
thoughts
that.
was that? Justin's?
That was mine.
Okay, yeah, I like that.
What about you, Mikey?
I've got something similar to him. I was just going to say
with a rash on your leg.
Yes,
I'm going to look at both of those when we're done with the show.
Sweet, thank you. I really appreciate it. No, Dr. Strangelove being the prequel to 2001. It's what happens after the atomic bomb when we all come together.
He said, "Come together."
I like that.
Let's overlap.
What about you?
Well, I want to thank everybody for listening. I really do have. We were talked at the beginning of the show how we weren't really looking forward to this one, right? But no, it's really
turned out a
really
lot better.
good.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and I go back and look at some of those. Once you kind of kaiju, there's a lot of great films in the 60s.
And there's a lot of great themes, whether or not it's the films or whether or not it's the comic books or the short stories or the movies or the TVs or anything, right? Some great themes, some great stuff. Take it as a warning, because that's what it is. Doctor Strangelove, is it sci-fi? Is it not? Who cares? It is a warning, like a lot of science fiction of the 60s is. It's a warning about getting right, acting right together, and understanding, like, man, machine, what's the difference? Is it empathy? Don't forget your empathy. Don't forget who you are. Don't forget about the importance and the drive of humanity and what we can do. And a mustard seed could turn into a mountain. Rockin' Robbie out.
Or you can turn it into mustard, which is better because you can put it on a hamburger.
I'd rather have a mountain of mustard.
Ooh, that's a lot. That seems like too much mustard.
Dope.
There's never too much money.
Thanks for rocking with us.
We appreciate you guys tuning in. Next time, aliens. Talk about aliens. Maybe the aliens franchise. Maybe about if anybody here has an experience with an outside alien being, or we'll talk about alien shows, movies, cartoons. Comics, maybe.
The Mighty Ducks, was that aliens?
We appreciate you guys tuning in.
Maybe if you're on psychedelic mushrooms.
My final thought is I want you guys to, everybody listening, to absorb this. And this may be deep. And this may change your life. But I think that if you're going to be on a 60s podcast, that you should, in fact, watch 2001: A fucking Space Odyssey from start to finish before you're on the show. That's just my opinion. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, next time, aliens. So tune in next time. Same sci-fi time, same sci-fi channel actually aliens, so it's going to be science fiction. So we'll just keep this science fiction going. Maybe the next one will be robots or some shit. We'll just do maybe we'll turn it to the PCP Science Fiction Podcast. How about that?
Okay.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Was that a warning?
I don't know. Good night.